Welcome back to Mantle Mondays. My name is Amar Varma, the co-founder and CEO of Mantle. Today I'm chatting with my very longtime friend, Mark Gilbert, who is the co-founder and CEO of Zocks. Mark, great to have you on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Love it. Let's jump right into it. Maybe give people some background and kind of who you are, what you are. I know we didn't know each other growing up, but we grew up not far from each other.
Yeah. So I'll go way, way back, which is why we grew up close to each other, but didn't know each other till a little later. So I grew up in Ottawa, mostly in Ottawa in Canada, moved around a few different spots in Canada. And then fast forward through all that, ended up at Waterloo Engineering with a fantastic class of people that, it's been actually kind of amazing to watch everyone, what they've done. And went through electrical engineering and hopped right into software pretty deeply. So I spent a lot of my career at Microsoft. I'd say kind of growing up there career-wise in Redmond and Seattle area. And then was in Europe for a bit. I was in Asia for a bit, all with Microsoft. Then came down to a startup here in San Francisco, which will kind of loop all the way back around to what we're doing now, but it was focused purely on financial services and insurance. It's kind of my first vertical SaaS company or experience. So I built out a lot of that company, became the CTO there, and then went to Twilio and ran a lot of their communication infrastructure around the world, onboarding a whole bunch of stuff for all the communication services. So yeah, a lot of different stuff. And then we started Zocks a little under 4 years ago, which seems both very recently and also a long, long, long time ago.
Mark's probably one of the more humble people out there. So let me tease this out for a bit for you. Oh, K24. That would have been our K section when they used to have those back in the day. Lucky for you, I still have the pictures. Lucky for me, I still have the pictures of that class. It was the original.
I don't know if that's lucky for me, but
give people some sense of depth of knowledge. First year students, and for like, they do this presentation class or something like that where you got to present something. I think I did mine on bending paper clips and you did yours on multi-threaded processing because that's what you did in your summer job. Maybe talk a bit about that experience as a teenager before entering university and what that was like.
Yeah, so I got into software pretty early, I would say, in my life. For not to date myself too much, but I got into the Commodore set of computers, the VIC-20s, the Commodore 64s, all of those. And then my first computer job was actually at Canada Post, which happened to be right across the street from my high school in Ottawa. So I went there and helped them program some things, actually using Visual Basic and a bunch of other things to get basically to optimize how they operate and everything else. So I did that for a while. And then in first year at Waterloo, where we went to school, for those who don't know, you have to work a lot. So you kind of do four months of school, 4 months of work for 5 years. It's quite a lot of work. And I started working at a company called Corel right away. Like I think we were only 3 or 4 months into school. Windows 95 hadn't yet shipped. And so we were dealing with all the joys of multi-threaded, which was new at the time, processing, multitasking operating systems. The internet, Netscape was just on a coming out party kind of thing. So it was a crazy time. But yeah, I did a lot of that. So it went very deeply technical for quite a while, I would say, until, it was probably 5 or 6 years into Microsoft after I graduated before I really started running like product management teams as well.
Yeah, we'll get into some of that. So let's kind of fast forward. We'll come back to some of the classmates and stuff and some of the things we've observed, which has been amazing to watch. But talk a bit about some of the seminal experiences and products through, the co-op phase. Maybe you joined Microsoft out of school. Some of the cool products you've done there and lessons learned, because I think there's so many good nuggets in there.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I started off at Corel, learned a ton there. So their main product is a product called Corel Draw. We actually were building an Office package as well. Learned a lot just about it's more than just the software, I would say, when you're building products. It's like, how people are using them. Corel, the great thing there is they took a very complicated, powerful tool, if you will, or product and made it fairly straightforward for people to use. And that was a lot of their magic. Then I actually started doing Java programming, but like at Corel. So they wanted to, I don't know if you remember this, but their CEO was like totally all in on Java. He was just like, everything's going to be Java. So we did like a Java version of Corel. We did an Office package. And then I think I was only in second year. I went down to Palo Alto to be an intern at two. It was Elon Musk's first company. And I think there were 6 of us living in 2 apartments in Palo Alto. It was the first time I had been to California at all. And anyways, worked a ton, we built essentially like an online mapping and directions and yellow pages product. It was great. I didn't know anything about VC before that, learned what that even meant, how to do all those things. So a ton there. And frankly, he, even at that point, had to like just get, he had a very strong way of being very clear about like kind of what the goals are and just getting there as quickly as possible. So that's held with me for quite a while. And then
And
went to
just to
Microsoft
interject
after that.
there, Zip2,
Yeah.
if you're young enough or don't remember, was the definitive set of directions you would print out when going to a place.
That's what it was. I remember
Yeah.
like we literally had to optimize the web pages so they printed properly, like something I don't think anyone, has done for 20 years, but it was it was cool. Yeah, so that was really cool. And then I was at Microsoft. It's hard to go over all the lessons there. Like I frankly learned a ton. Microsoft is a great place to learn how to build products. Everything from like how to deal with just huge scale, how to deal with the different complexities of users. Like just you end up with very very advanced people, very non-advanced people, and how to just kind of like thread that needle and make it smooth the whole way across, which is challenging. Still a challenge today.
Let's talk a bit about that. So, I always thought you'd be running the place.
Yeah.
I don't think I was alone in that. But you opted for a different path. Maybe talk through your thinking and process of doing that, because most people, and I would say like almost everybody except 1 in 10 million, would have kept doing what you were doing there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Microsoft, I did a lot. As I said, it's a great place to learn, great place to do. So I learned, initially, obviously, how to build scaled software, how to design that, ran a lot of different product teams. And then at Microsoft, one of the great things about being technical is typically the technical people that are running the businesses, frankly. So you start to see that, how they operate and everything else. Later in my path there, I ended up as the technical assistant for one of our top execs named Bob Muglia, who is fantastic. He had a very large organization, very large business. And so you just kind of watch how that business operates, how he operates as a leader. Learned a ton through that. And it was just super interesting, frankly. Like it's really hard to, get that experience or get those learnings from anywhere else. And then after that, a few years after that, he had left the company as well. And I just kind of decided that I'd always loved startups. I'd started a few different products at Microsoft. I'd worked on big products there. But when you're at a large company, like even when you're starting something, it's a little different. Like there's just different guardrails. Obviously, the funding is completely different and all that. So I wanted to really get in to startups. And I talked to a few friends who are VCs who gave me some good advice, which are like basically in startups, everything is going to go to crap at some point. So you just make sure you're with the right people, and that like if you're with the right people, you're probably as good as you're going to get, and then you'll learn things.
Yeah.
So came down then and decided to leave. I looked at a few different things leaving, but ultimately decided to go to a company called Hearsay Social, and that partly one of the co-founders that worked for me at Microsoft, great person. Other co-founder, also super smart as I met her. And so, just decided to go. It's a hard leap. Like to your point, most people, we both have a lot of friends at Microsoft. They've done their whole careers there and have fabulous careers. But just after a while, I think decided that I wanted to try something different and just kind of learn how to build
I think
from
it speaks a
scratch, if
lot
you
to
will.
you in terms of testament of like growth mindset, new experiences. Like I think you passing mentioned it, but I think you lived in a few different countries, spoke a few different languages on behalf of Microsoft. Maybe list them, and maybe if there's a lesson or two in each of them, that'd be helpful just to talk through.
Yeah, so you're right. I like the less polite way of putting it is I probably get bored or easy, so I need to kind of continually be learning. And one of the things for me is like I feel like if I am learning a lot, I'm pretty happy where I am. But I was in Germany for about 3 years at Microsoft. We were building out a engineering and kind of what we call innovation group there that kind of connected a lot of the work going on in Europe around mobile and privacy with Redmond. Learned a lot there, frankly. Like Microsoft's a very different company as soon as you get outside of Seattle and Redmond. Just how the field works, like how the sales teams work, all that. Um, Learned a bit of German and then was back and then was actually in Shanghai for 3 years, building out services for Microsoft there. So, like, typically when Microsoft at that point was going in other areas, they would start with technologies, then they would get to products, and then we get to like businesses. And so at that point, we're starting to really build and operate businesses in Shanghai. So it's great. Learned a ton. Honestly, from a management point of view, there's probably no better way to learn how to manage broadly than going into different cultures and doing it. Like, they just operate differently. The way people expect companies to work are different. It's just a huge amount of learning there. So yeah,
And
I feel like I'm under answering your question, but a ton of
no,
learning on everything. And like, just, I think for anyone at a big company, they'll know this, like, very bigger companies that are really well run have very strong support functions, right? Like HR, finance, recruiting, like all of these things. As you get farther out, it becomes a little bit more Wild West. So you just start to see and learn a lot more, and you see a little under the covers a bit more too, which is super interesting.
I call it the valence shells from headquarters, right? There's some distance squared.
Yeah,
Drop
that's it.
off.
That's it. And it
Yeah,
gets a little crazier the farther you get away.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Amazing. And then uh, Twilio, talk a bit about that. I think it was a pretty epic run while you were there. And maybe I was going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Maybe walk through that.
Yeah, Twilio is great, fantastic company. I got there, they were already public, they were growing like crazy. I think at that point, you always have this challenge of try to scale the organization as much as possible while trying to keep the culture. You know what I mean? Like, keep the startup culture, if you will. And Jeff, I think, was doing that quite well. We also just like the growth of scale there was, it's almost hard to understand. Like, it was going like crazy. And, like, we were in I think when I got there, we were in the 100 millions of revenue, like a couple hundred. And it was like, growing at nearly like well over 50% for years. And and with Twilio, because it's a usage based business for the most part, that means the volumes are growing. That means the infrastructure is scaling. Everything is growing. So we just, like, literally for years, I guess, we would get together multiple times a week and very often every day and just look at the businesses. Like, the messaging business was the fastest growing. So there's another person I worked with there and that worked for, named Simon, who ran that, was really good. But you basically would have to get together every day and just figure out like what's going on, what's going on. There are, like, I won't go into details too much on it because it's probably not the best thing to share. But like, there were examples where we had like forgotten things or found things that were like, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and you're just like, crap, did anyone, like, you just start looking through spreadsheets and finding things. Like, the systems were it was just that company was growing so quickly, right? And so they had some very good people, um, growing
This is the high
very
class
quickly.
problem, right? You get you pray for the tailwinds, they come, and all of a sudden you're like, we're growing faster than we can scale. It's growing faster than we can instrument. Uh, I think everybody's probably used your product either directly or in the background, right? Like, it's just one of those things,
Yeah,
and it's like, oh yeah, I've used that thing. Um, and it's like, this is where the real lessons happen. And to tell everybody that you had to meet daily to go through it is like, gives people a sense of the speed and iteration at which stuff's moving, right?
yeah.
Like,
No, it was interesting. Like, you would literally get together kind of every day, every night, or whatever, like whenever it was. Sometimes they were just quick calls, and it's like, and then the thing that made that even crazier is as COVID hit, the business was already growing like crazy, and as soon as COVID hit, it was just a massive tailwind. So you're just like, you're just going, and then exactly as you'd expect, right? Like, a lot of really great people there, and something would get fixed, and then just because of the scale, like days or a week
but
later, something else would need to get pushed.
Twilio was part of a special cohort of companies that through COVID, like, I don't know what the multiple of expansion was, but it was like in that cohort of like, everybody needs Twilio.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. it just blew up.
What was kind of the, the seminal thing that came out of it outside of like, you can't time COVID, you can't time the process, but like, what was the reason you all were able to continue growing while other, like, I'll put DocuSign in there and,
Yeah.
Shopify and some others. You were all in this special cohort. What's kind of the, obviously product, but what was the thing that allows you to continue lift off?
Yeah, like at some level, I think all those companies, right, were building for the future. Like, they were like, in the future, this is just going to be everywhere. And COVID, like, 10x that very quickly. I I always attribute a lot to luck, but I think luckily, like I had gotten there a year and a bit before COVID. And so we had a number of systems in place that we actually felt frankly fairly good about until COVID hit. And then you're just like, oof, okay, this is coming. But like Shopify is a good example too, right? Like they were on, like, I think in all these businesses, this is actually something Bob taught me at Microsoft very well, but like you need tailwinds. Like you want the forces of nature to be going with you. And I think all of those businesses had the force of nature behind them. And then, that tailwind turned to a tail hurricane with COVID. And you just have
Yeah.
to kind of be ready and go. And then the other big challenge, which you can see a lot of Twilio, is you need the talent to hold on and do that because you can plan for whenever, but eventually, right? Like when you're there are high class problems, but they're still problems. So you need good people to be able to hop on them.
All right, let's get into this one. Zocks. It's been amazing to watch this as a supporter of yours and fan and cheerleader. Unbelievable. So maybe talk us through the why, the frustration, and then kind of like it's been a pretty epic journey so far. So maybe we'll start there and we'll step through it.
Yeah. So we started the company for a few different reasons, but at a high level, at the end of my Twilio career, I was working with a lot of the enterprises there just because of my background, and a lot of those were banks and insurers. And they wanted to start to understand, like, can we start to see inside of these conversations, right? Really start to understand what's going on. And so we actually started Zocks really around kind of a very highly private, secure, kind of AI based communication layer where we could get data out of the systems, like out of the communication streams, very quickly. So we built for a bit. All of the founding team had worked at companies that had focused on financial services before. So like we understood compliance, we understood security aspects, and frankly, just what the users wanted. So we built for a while. And I think as every startup does, like, kind of goes around and in the dark with a flashlight and learns some things. And then we started an early adopter program very specifically focused on financial advisors. The platform could do a fair amount of different things, but that's really where we focused. And it took off very quickly. So we started that, I think, late summer 23. And in 6 months or less, we had about 250 firms on the platform. And we literally we we part of the reason we launched when we did is because it took us a while just to get billing working properly. Like it was just growing and growing. And then we launched pretty much 2 years ago now. And we grew in the last year about 7.5 times. It's been growing very quickly. A lot of the Twilio lessons, frankly, have come in to play where it's just been
Yeah,
going
yeah.
well. And I think there's two huge aspects. Like it solves a huge pain point for people, right? So a lot of it is like just there's a lot of administrative work in financial services that it gets rid of. The really interesting thing I think with AI is once you start doing that, they also start to grow their business a lot more quickly because like they're able to follow up with clients more quickly in a more personalized way. It's just really impactful. And so the people that are leaning in heavily are both growing their businesses more quickly, offering a better client service, frankly. And then as part of that, they're also getting better data. So they're able to organically grow their business even more quickly. And so I think the industry is going to change pretty drastically with AI. Plus, the fact that the underlying models are just getting so good so fast that, it's kind of like a multiplier, if you will, a compounding effect.
So there's a couple elements in there. I think you talk about like, I'll paraphrase here, but there's a pain, and you kind of
Yeah.
went through the pain
Yeah.
and said, "We can do this thing for you." And then once that pain was like relieved or massaged, you're able to optimize a lot of the actual workflow and timelines and compression of timelines and value. Um, I think for those who aren't familiar with your customer set, maybe kind of walk through the status quo and then what happens working with you, because I think it's enlightening just to hear that
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah. So for those, like, I think one of the interesting things, just as you mentioned, I think for those who haven't worked on product a lot, is like you really want to find kind of a painkiller more than a vitamin. Like you really want something where there's a acute pain. And so in our world, for those that don't know financial advisors well, like they meet with their clients regularly. They're actually required legally to capture a bunch of notes and write things down, and they want to do that as well because they, like the client relationship is very important for them. The entire back office in finance in the US is very like paper slash digital paper based, right? So like at the best, there's a bunch of like, you can think of them as SQL servers in the back end. And then there's all this communication, right? Just talking. And then that talking typically goes to like, you know, paper, essentially digital paper that then goes into like literally PDFs that often get DocuSign. Sometimes it'll go in directly into systems. But these people will spend over half their time, well over half their time, on what we would think of as administrative work in the back office. So not meeting with clients, not trying to grow their business, just trying to get the paperwork done. And that is very, very heavy for them. And the ones that are good have a lot of clients that want to work with them and they literally just can't, right? Their only alternative is to kind of hire, admins and associates. And most of them have done that. But even that hits a scale at some point. It just gets very hard to scale that. And so when they start working with us, we can shrink that down drastically. So like right away, we will see, we've done this across a number of large clients. Like they'll deploy us really with no customizations and be able to get 8 to 10 hours back per person per week, which is like, if you just do the math on that, right? Like that's a full workday back. It's phenomenal, right? It's phenomenal. And then once you start to do that, this is the nice cycle for us. That gives you better data. And then, for anybody working generally in excited about data fields, like the more data you have, the more dense your data is on somebody, the more you can do for them. And so that's why we can now do things like open accounts. We can fill out planning systems for them. We can do all of these different things that they want to do, but they don't want to have to do themselves or have to spend a lot of time in. So we're like at a high level getting rid of a ton of data entry, ton of admin work, ton of data retrieval, and allowing them to focus on their clients. And then the nice thing now is now that we have that data, we can really start to help them anticipate the needs of their clients, which is really what they want to be doing, right? They don't want to be like checking in with their clients every couple months to be like, anything changed? Anything changed? They really want to know, like, hey, Mark, you mentioned 4 months ago that your son was going to university. Like, we just wanted to check in and hear how things are going, like whatever. Like, it's a lot more timely, right? Like you normally would with friends or anything else. And so it completely changes their business. And we now see people scale, right, to like the way they typically measure themselves is the amount of assets that they manage, right? Assets under management. And they scale that, at levels that they just would not be able to do with the same team before. And frankly, it just wouldn't be feasible with humans before. So it's really,
I
and
went
we're just starting.
Yeah, I think you're just starting has been my sense on this. I just, for those out there, like RIAs are registered investment advisors. I went and did some quick homework here, and this is the firms that you've never heard of generally, unless you're a customer, and they're called, name and associates, name and name and name. Like pick your thing. Not law firms, they're accounting firms, right? So it's like the other one. And this group now is sitting at, I think I last checked, they're growing at like 12 to 15% a year, which is a great growth number. But the quantum that they're at is something in the 140 to 150 trillion dollars of assets in America being managed by RIAs, growing at that scale, just for quantum. And I'm like, wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
I
And
think
they're
there's
growing so quickly.
16,000. Yeah, they're growing so quickly. I think there's 16,000 that are SEC registered advisors or so. Um, there's just some interesting stats out there, and there's like a bunch of PE money going in to consolidate this, and it's moving super duper fast. And your product couldn't be better fit for this.
No, it's great. Like it's been, again, like we get a bit of a tailwind from that. And again, once you get like the larger firms on, just as you mentioned, they're doing a lot of acquisitions. Like it's a great financial model for private equity and things like that. And so they do that. That allows us to grow very quickly in there. And then, like a lot of private equity funded businesses, they want to get efficiencies. And the way they do that is typically by getting it out of the back office, right? So the more that we can help them, we can kind of share the savings with them for all intents and purposes.
So a couple of quick questions here on this, maybe for help some folks, because you're one of the few product people that would be able to do this insightfully. Early on, you're building for a space. Obviously, it's never a straight line to the top, right? So there's probably some pitfalls or decisions you might have made that you could go back on. So I always love to hear
Yep.
those. And then now, you, like everyone else, having been a seasoned product person, is building in a market where the underlying advances are, I don't know, hourly, daily, like pick your
Yeah,
time frame.
kind of
How do
unbelievable.
you how do
Yeah.
you how do you kind of thread the needle, look around the corners in this kind of time frame?
Yeah. So on the first one, it's hard to list all the things that we would have done differently. Like I think it's everything everyone tells you, right? Like get in front of people sooner, get in front of people quicker. We were again very lucky that we had a great set of investors, and specifically like our lead investor, Lightspeed led ours, and so we were funded to go build the platform, and we did that, and that's paying off a lot of dividends now. I think even as we look at like other people in this space, they're struggling to kind of take a nap and build it out. And we already have a lot of underpinnings. That being said, I would still spend more time with customers earlier and just zigging and zagging. It frankly took us a little bit to convince ourselves. It's almost comical now to think of this, but that the market was big enough. Now we look at it and it's like it's endless, right? Like you can just keep going and going. There's just so much to do and so much opportunity there. Um, so a lot of different things there, but it's all the things that you would normally hear. I think it's just hard to do that. Um, it's hard to do that. And, like it's hard to force yourself to go have these uncomfortable conversations, start to sell, especially as a technical person to, like sell what you're doing and everything else. Um, as far as the speed of things, that wasn't a great answer to the other question, by the way. I'm trying to think of other things that I would do differently, but I think
Yeah,
my,
yeah,
my
yeah.
brain has probably blocked it out at this point. On the other side, like it's interesting. We get asked a lot, or not a lot, but we get asked for roadmaps. And in this space, like I actually just don't think road mapping is particularly helpful. Like it's not something, it is moving so quickly that what we do is we really kind of debate priorities. Like, like what are the things, what are the outcomes that we want to get to? We will invest in, let's say 2, 3, 4 of those, right? There may be like one area for us that matters a lot is integrations, both with like public systems as well as existing like our clients' internal systems. So we'll invest and do a number of different things there, but there's really kind of outcomes that we're going towards. And then we have a fairly good feel now for like what AI is really good at and frankly what it's less good at. And even as it gets better and better, certain things it still isn't awesome at. So we basically build there and then just get it in front of users and customers as quickly as possible to iterate on. And we measure a lot. And that's worked very well for us. So we will do roadmaps for things like, if there's a large enterprise that needs a specific integration and then they have to plan for it because of their IT team, like we'll get predictability on that. But I would say like 70% of the engineering team is really running in what is truly like kind of an agile model of, what are they trying to do? How are we getting there? And then how do we tune it to get there?
Does, does
Um,
this
yeah.
does this differ significantly from doing, I don't know, Windows Millennia or something like that? Like it's
Yes,
totally a
it does.
different game, right?
It
Um,
does. Yeah, we don't like. I think one of the tricks with Agile for everyone who's done Agile is like, I think when that first became popular, and it was kind of in the early knots around like kind of the web days, right? Of like, hey, we're going to build this thing. Like Hotmail used it a lot. Um, it gets really hard as soon as someone is like, well, what are you going to do in 6 months, right? Like how far along are you going to be? And as soon as you put Agile in a big company, it's not Agile anymore. Like you have promises and everything else, and then so we've really gone back to like some of the roots of that, which is like, what is the goal, right? And so we are like, as an example now, right? We are very open with our customers of like, hey, we are going to try to work through the areas that you're spending the most time on that aren't adding value, and like, frankly, automate as much as we can for that, right? We're going to use that data to help you organically grow more quickly and understand your clients better. And so you kind of end up making promises to them and then you're just filling in those promises, right? And if you get something
Mhm.
wrong, if I'm like, hey, we're going to promise to do blah, 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 and we're just off, you just have to come clean and say, look, like that's going to be a lot longer than we think for some reasons. So we're just going to either pause it or it's just going to be longer and we'll slow roll. But we kind of view it in that way, more like what are our principles and what are our promises? And then we just have to watch not getting into too much detail because honestly, you're always wrong, right? Like anybody who designs a feature or set of capabilities will do it. And then as soon as you put it in front of a bunch of users, it needs to change. But it is tricky. It's tricky. Like last year, as an example, as we were planning, we had fantastic growth last year. We were not planning to grow that quickly. We did, which was awesome. And we just we overshot what I already thought were very aggressive plans. And you're just going, and a lot of that is just everything is moving so quick and the demand is so high. And so you just have to kind of adapt and keep going there.
let's talk a bit about some of the en vogue stuff du jour on AI. couple of angles here. One, I think you're one of the examples of like, not to pigeonhole it, but a
Yep.
vertical integration of a market, like a market using AI as kind of the superpower in here. How do you convince investors? You just announced you raised $45 million into Series B very quickly after you raised like a $14 million
Yeah.
dollar Series A. It's amazing growth and trajectory. How do you demonstrate this kind of depth of knowledge when everybody can walk in saying, AI powered this deck, AI powered our product, and I'm like a 2-person show?
Yeah. Um, the one thing I would say on the investor side that it took us a while to learn, I think we got lucky again at the start with Lightspeed and Aura, frankly, is there are investors who are product people, like where they literally want to look under the hood and understand what you built and how you built, like not necessarily the details of how you built it, but like more, not just like tell us about the business and how much you're growing. They really want to know and kind of dig. And the reality is like, Akosh and I, like my co-founder, we're product engineering people, and so we just click better with those investors straight out. And it took me a while to learn that. Like in our A round, you talk to everyone, and a lot of them just have different philosophies for whatever they're doing. Right, they're more financially oriented or whatever else. Once you get to what I would call kind of a product focused or engineering focused investor, the discussion just kind of happens. Frankly, right? Like it's like they'll ask questions. The real thing is you'll have learnings that are obvious in hindsight, but you would never guess going in, right? Like you would never guess from reading 20 blog posts on Claudebot or anything like that, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we did this thing. And then we thought this was going to happen, but actually this happened for these reasons. And it's kind of obvious when you hear it, but there's no way you would have known unless you kind of like ran at that wall. So I would say in those discussions, it comes out pretty quickly. And frankly, like, as you're raising money, we've been lucky to have a lot of interest. You want to have investors we want to have investors that care about that as well, right? Where they're like, we think that we're super early in AI. I don't think that's a particularly risky thing to say. And so, we think of this as V1. We're starting to get into V2 now, and it's going to be a V3 and a V4. And we really want to be set up for that, like for a really big long-term company. And part of that for us is we invest like heavier than anyone else, any of our, I would say, peers in R&D, right? And we take that from other areas and basically invest heavily there. And so we want the investors to like that too. But it's the details. They just start asking. Like, it's not like you're going in to prove it or anything like that. But once you start the discussion, it becomes kind of obvious. And frankly, most of those investors have some sort of technical or product background, I would say.
Yeah, there's the standard questions. Why couldn't I vibe code this?
Yeah.
Data set, production, security. But then they're like, oh, okay, give me 2 more flips of the model. And I'm like, okay, data set, security. There's just some things that end up being
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like
This is
rolling this
great.
stuff out is hard. I think the hardest thing with AI too, for a lot of people looking at it, is like, it's hard to describe how much this is true for this technology, but like demos are easy, production is very hard, which is, very different from a lot of like traditional software. And that's all those learnings you just got to go through. But yeah, you get all the same questions, right? Like, what if, but it's the same. Like 10 years ago, you would get the like, what if Amazon built this, right? Like, or, like it's all the same kind of stuff. Now it's,
Same
what if
question,
the
different.
LLMs do this? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. How has it changed your workflow as a founder? Things that you may do differently?
Yeah, I do things a lot differently. So I'm not a prolific writer, and I find AI helps a lot with getting the blank page problem gone. It just allows us to scale as an organization. So we have a number of different offices. Like we're in quite a lot of different time zones now. And so written communication matters a lot. All of these things matter a lot. It's not like we're all just hanging out in the same room and like rolling our chairs over and chatting. So I like, frankly, AI is just almost like, it'd be very hard to operate at our scale without it. Just the way that we're set up and the way we operate. One of the nice things is like we've really been using it from the start because we have to use it in our product all the time anyway. So what it can and can't do. And I think even recently, right, with a lot of like the different things that have come out to really start to optimize work. Yeah, we just lean in a lot. It is interesting. I do find some of our people are more aggressive on using it and some are less, even though they all work directly in it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a nudge to get people to kind of like start to use it and trust it a little bit more. But more and more, it's changed almost everything we do.
Looking forward, what should we expect to see next from Zocks in the next year or two?
There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. So like, I would say at a high level, we really look at things as like, how much of this reactive work can we take off, these firms' hands, not just like the advisors, but their teams. And frankly, now the whole firms. We've had a lot of enterprise uptake in the last year, which is great. And so that's just going to continue going. And I think it's going to amaze people, right? Like I think things today that take people hours and hours and hours to do are going to be able to get done in a couple minutes. And it's going to frankly just change the industry. Like the way that, the services even these firms offer are going to change, because all of a sudden you can incrementally like do all of these things for people that you wouldn't previously. It just wasn't feasible to do it for them. So we're going to continue that. And I think we feel really good about that. But in addition to that, you're going to start to see more and more of really helping advisors anticipate and grow their business. So like, when are you reaching out to the right people? How is that working? And, if you fast forward a couple of years, and with AI, it could be a year, it could be 3 years, who knows? You're going to see these businesses scale in ways that have just never been possible before. And so that's really our destination, if you will. Like we're really building to like, how do we supercharge and superpower these people as much as possible? And sometimes that's automating something that may be very manual in the back office that you can now do with AI, which is great. Sometimes that's looking across the data and giving them insights so they can actually go like be better at what they do and frankly help their clients more. And sometimes that's even offering them new capabilities, either directly ourselves or connecting in with other systems to go do it. But you're going to see, it's very rare to see like a single advisor have like 1 billion of assets under management today. I wouldn't say it's pretty rare. Like that's a huge milestone for people. You're going to see, advisors with smaller teams start to run a few billion, 5 and even 10 up. I think you're going to start to see mass affluent wealth products that just don't exist today. Like it's very hard for wealth, for those who don't know, like for RIAs and wealth managers to really handle people, with under 1 million or, with only a few 100,000 of assets. Those people want help often as they're going through different life events. That's all going to become possible. It's amazing. I think like more and more people are frankly going to have a much better relationship with the financial services industry just because of AI. And that's really where we're going towards.
That's very cool. I feel like, paraphrasing a bit here, so keep me honest, but it was like, we're going to make your existing role better. We're going to allow you to be a superpower in this, which gets you to grow your business. And there's probably some corners that you're looking around where people are like, I can offer a new connecting service, a new opportunity and stuff, which I think is great. And then, we see it sometimes as well. And tangentially, it's like, if you look at that pyramid of services, those with the wealth at the top get all of the
Yep.
attention. And then
Yep.
the other like trapezoid sitting underneath it is huge. And getting those folks into the system is a big deal. I think the mass affluent one is really interesting, because it's like, what stops you from having that service as a mass affluent versus a $10 billion family office? It's a some financial requirement, obviously, but B, they can't service you. They don't have the tools, and I think you're going to open
Yeah.
up that door for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally right. Like at a high level, you're going to see what you see in most of these like technology, revolutions, if you will. But very ultra high net worth services are going to be offered to high net worth, to millionaire, to mass affluent. It'll just go like, we can all get black cars now to go to the airport. We mostly wouldn't have done that 20 years ago before, like in Uber or Lyft. You're just going to see it throughout. It's going to be great. Yeah, I think it's really cool.
Couple of final quick hits for you. What should we expect to see from Mark Gilbert in the next decade?
You're going to see a lot of Zocks. I'm spending a lot of time on Zocks. I know it looks easy, but a lot of that. I just like, I really like working, like AI, frankly, has it's a new generation of technology that's like, I'm sure you feel the same way, but it's almost like reinvigorated a lot of interest. So I think we'll be going very deep there. And really just kind of focused on that growing, or I love growing teams and organizations, or teams getting bigger and bigger. We have a lot of really good talent that is, younger, better, smarter than I am. So just making them better and better. I would say those are the big things. And then if I can do that and get 30 to 40 days of skiing in a year, then I'll call it a win. I would say those are kind of the goals.
There you go. There you go. Couple last ones. Last book you read?
I'm almost done. You're going to laugh at this, but it's a great book. Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. And when I say read, it's Audible, just to be totally transparent. But it's great. It talks about just like how the Mongolian Empire was created, how much of today's world is based on that, and all of these things that they did. It's super interesting book. But anyways, so that's the book.
Red or white?
Red.
Okay. PNW Bay Area.
I would say Bay Area.
Bay Area.
Yeah, I would say Bay Area. I like sun.
Yeah, that's true. We've had a long time knowing each other, and I always learn and admire everything you're kind of building and growing through. So thanks for sharing that with us, and more success to come.
Yeah, well, thank you as well. Like, you've been obviously super helpful through the journey. Congrats on everything with Mantle. We've used you, as we've now had to do 2 fundraisers in the last year. A lot of the forecasting tools and what if tools have been very helpful. So thank you for that. But yeah, appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.